Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name's Andrea, and I thought maybe some people are looking for different careers or contemplating what they want to be, or maybe they're at a crossroads right now. And if you've been watching kind of a lot of booktube, you will have seen a lot of librarians or people in library school. I just thought I'd put my 2 cents in it, mainly because I have been a librarian for a little bit, but also because I've worked in libraries for a really long time, and I want to make this video as something I wish I could have seen before entering library school. So the first thing you should know is that there are different kinds of librarian. And I didn't even know this. So I thought that was just the public library and school libraries. But it turns out there's a lot more to it. There are business librarians who work in basically business buildings, and their job is very different. It might involve, a secretarial type of setting, folders, documents, records management, even archival kind of work, rather than librarianship as the sort of traditional image most people have in their head when they think librarian. Then there are law librarians. Most of these actually have a law degree on top of their librarianship degree, but you should look into it more. I'm not in that field, so I can't really say. Then there are medical librarians. Now, there are libraries within hospitals. I have personally worked at the mental health hospital before and their library. The medical field is like a whole different ballgame because you have all of these methods of doing research using a lot of databases, and there are so many rules to using medical subject headings. There are so many videos on that. I will link a few below because the National Library of Medicine makes a lot of these videos teaching you how to use these kind of methods. And if that doesn't look interesting to you, you might have to think, well, maybe this is for me or this isn't for me. So medical librarianship is another one. Then, of course, there's academic librarianship, which you would have encountered in college, university. And these ones often involve that you as the librarian will be participating in teaching with professors and doing seminars and hosting things for your little university library, but also you would be doing and conducting research on your own. You would go to conferences, present your own papers. This would involve a lot more research on your end, and it would be kind of an academic support job. So you would kind of be a complement to a professor in many ways and to the academic community. The people who actually put away books or shelve or do things like that are not really the librarians. Most of the time those are either the student helpers or the pages. So academic librarianship might be for you if you're really into research in general and you really like teaching and you like that hybrid of education and research. The last one, and this is the most popular one, is public librarianship. Now, public librarianship can be anything because it all depends on the community around that library. So for example, if the community immediately around you is made up of senior citizens, then a lot of the things you do will cater to that community. So you might have to teach people how to use email for the first time, or you might have to teach people how to use the computer, or how to or host seminars around senior projects or senior interests. And that's just entirely dependent on where you are and where you get hired. And this is where I should probably mention that if you personally identify as a super introvert and you want to be a librarian because you like books and you don't like people, that is not the attitude to have as a librarian. You are a public servant. You belong to the community. That is your job, to serve the community. You need to help people with the printers, you need to help people find books, but most of the time you will just be servicing the community that you have with their needs. In fact, the word community is actually kind of a big word in librarianship. If you can put that on your application, but also to keep that in mind because it's very important. When I said that anything could happen in a public library, I truly mean it. You have to be prepared for anything. In Toronto alone, sometimes there are stabbings at the library because it's a public space. Librarians have taken on the opioid crisis And it's just things you haven't even thought that you would have to deal with. Sometimes there are cops in libraries. There are some very strange situations that happen. And by strange, sometimes it can be really funny and sometimes it can be really awkward. And I'll link below some people's experiences of funny things that have happened in the library, because it's very important. So you and your job depend on the people you are serving as to what you will be doing, if that makes sense. If all of the things I said sound kind of bonkers to you and you're like, no, I want to work only with books, that will most likely not happen unless you are a cataloger, in which case you just type in kind of code and data into a computer system all day. So that's something to consider if you just want to touch a book in a computer. And another one is conservation. So conservators have a job where they're kind of like a hybrid of an artist and a chemist. And there's a separate degree for that. And they will work in a lab mostly with chemicals, and they will try to preserve and restore damaged books. And in this situation, you could be dealing with books that have, lice or mold or anything in between. And this is just something you're gonna have to handle most of the time in a lab. And this is kind of a more limited job opportunity kind of job. And even the spots to get into conservation programs are pretty limited. So it's something to consider if you do like science. Then another thing to consider is the setup. So most people like libraries because they think they're going to be surrounded by books. But even if you are in a library that looks spectacular and there's books everywhere, the place where the librarians actually work usually is like a hive of cubicles at the back, or an individual office, or just kind of behind a counter somewhere. So don't think that just because you're a librarian or have library technician or library something in your title that you will be just surrounded by books all the time, because that's not really what happens. Number 2, the silence might break you. I know this sounds like a weird concept. Most people think that they love silence and they're so looking forward to it. I thought I was one of those people too. I really did. And when you go to the library as a library user, you either take out a book or you sit down and study. And most students nowadays, when they do study in the library, they put their headphones in and they listen to like Disney soundtracks or magical soundtracks or something in the background while they're sitting there being forced to kind of study, because that's the studious environment around them. But as a librarian, you don't get headphones. You're mostly just sitting in complete silence for 8 hours. And if anyone drops a pin, you have to go and shush them. And this silence is kind of a lot for 40+ hours a week. Don't become a librarian as a backup. That is very silly to do, because it involves as much work as doing something else. So if you're going to become a teacher, you still have to go to teachers college after your undergrad. So if you still have to do a 2-year master's degree for your librarianship, at this point, if you were going to consider something else, do that something else. Don't think of this as like a backup on your way to doing something else, because it involves a lot of work. It is still very competitive, and it's much more competitive when you have to look for a job in the future. Also, just because you decided you want to be a medical librarian or an academic librarian does not guarantee that once you've graduated, you will actually get a job in exactly the field you wanted. You might have to wait, you might have to move, you might have to put in a lot of effort. It might take a long time. So just be prepared for that. Don't think that, oh, like I just coasted and I will get exactly the type of job I want and exactly the type of environment. Also, most librarians in libraries that are top-notch, like Library of Congress, British Library, the Thomas Fisher Rare Books Library in Toronto, most of these people really do have PhDs. They are well-versed, they know Latin, they know everything about manuscripts. It's like top-notch. Like, you can't just be like, oh, well, I'll just graduate and walk straight into there, it'll be fine. That's very unlikely. So be prepared for that. And then the last thing I'll mention is that you don't have to be a librarian to work in a library, just like you don't have to work in a library to be a librarian. So if your goal is to just work in a library, you can get a library technician diploma, which is a lot shorter. I think it's 8 months, if not a year. And it's usually a certificate/diploma program in North America. I'm not sure about the UK, but if you are from the UK, I'll link below Elizabeth from Books and Pieces video on how to become a librarian in the UK. But in North America, you have like certificates. So you can become a technician, you can become a budgeting economics person, an HR person, a community building person, a project planner. There are so many things, especially in the techie world as well, because libraries are becoming more digital. So there's 3D printing programs that are kind of hosted by the more techie people in libraries. A lot of things to consider if you just want to work in a library. It is doable without being a librarian. And likewise, if you are a librarian, but you're a business librarian, law librarian, medical librarian, your setting might be hospital, law firm, business building. So it's kind of a whole mix of things. Be prepared for anything, and don't think, just all I want you to know basically is don't think that you will walk into a job where you're basically Belle from Beauty and the Beast and you're just gonna sit there with a lot of books and read and give people reading recommendations, and you will be this good, kind-hearted person who just shares books with people and shelves books. That's not gonna happen. And you're not gonna read at all. Like, that's not what librarians do at all. So if any of that sounded a little frightening, you should maybe think about it a little longer and consider it strongly. And BookTube is a lot closer to being that idealized librarian job than actual librarian jobs. And if you are an introvert and don't like talking to people, again, really reconsider, because you are a public servant. So that's just my 2 cents. It's something you should know from my perspective. Obviously, all of this is biased. All of this is based on my experiences and research. I have worked in several libraries. I've worked in medical, academic, and I volunteered in public ones. So I have seen a little bit of each. So all I can tell you is use your best judgment. And if you do want information on how to apply, what it takes to actually go through the system, the courses, etc., there are other booktubers who have made wonderful videos on those for both North America and the UK. So I'll link all of those down below, and you should take a look and be informed. So on that note, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in my next booktube video. Bye!